Herbert Marcus and others, adding Max Weber's typology or theory of social inequality. And that is the theory I'm going to use in this approach. Whereby the capitalist system, like I said, has different stages. The initial stage, which is called the stage of primitive accumulation, when industrial revolution started in Europe, Britain, France, Germany, and other places, replacing the feudal system. The surplus value of the workers, called proletariats, assisted in building the industries. But when the industries grew, when it developed, it needed things that could not be provided in Europe: raw materials and markets. In terms of climate, Europe is not suitable for production of such materials, raw materials needed in the industry. So they had to go global. And that was the next stage of capitalism, the mercantilist capitalist stage, whereby you had to go to Africa, Asia, Latin America, plus the Americas, to look for raw materials to feed the industries and the markets. That was the next stage of the capitalist system. And that system also ran into the next stage, whereby capitalism is a system that is made up of features like laissez-faire, that is free trade, utilitarianism, individualism, and competition. So there was free trade at that place, at that period. So writers like Adam Smith, Ricardo, and things like that, the champions of free trade thesis, that it was necessary for Europeans to go all over the world to have free trade and things like that. Now, eventually, because of the competition for raw materials and markets, it led to the next stage, that was monopoly capitalism. Otherwise, it had translated into colonization and neo-colonial system. Monopoly capitalism, where because of the competition, Europeans in Africa, in Asia, other places, thought of dividing up the whole world, which we call the peripheral areas of global capital. Africa, Asia. Asia was divided into Mediterranean territories. Africa was balkanized into different colonies, owned by France, Germany, Italy, and other places, Portugal, and others like that. So, as related to Venezuela, those the Europeans, especially the Spaniards, from Spain, they sent explorers to different parts of the world to look for sources of raw materials, mineral resources. So that can explain the visit by Columbus to the Americas. In the second visit, is here in Venezuela, what is now known as Venezuela, to look for sites of mineral resources and things like that. So the colonial system was established by Spain. Other Europeans were there to compete. Germany and so Britain was giving colonial, that was being colonized, and rights to trade and things like that. So Spain outsmarted other European countries and colonized Venezuela in the second half of the 16th century until it attained independence in 1811. So under colonial rule, the colonial administration benefited by establishing large farms, because they needed raw materials, exploiting the mineral resources and other forms of resources that they needed in their industries. So, you see, therefore, Venezuela, like Africa and South Asian countries, had been exploited. Resources had been exploited since that period, the stage of mercantilist capitalism, where European explorers discovered those areas to need supermarket and raw materials and things like that. So, Christopher Columbus was the first among the explorers that was known to have visited Venezuela in 1498. And Eventually, America came on board after independence to recognize Venezuela in 1835 as an independent state. So, Venezuela has the largest oil reserve known today. The largest oil reserve known today. And by 1928, it experienced oil boom. So oil became, with that, it transformed Venezuela from a purely agrarian economy to an oil-producing country that was became the world-leading exporter of oil and second to the United States in oil production by 1928. The United States companies invested heavily in Venezuela's oil industry, and so was other European companies. So that stage, you see the multinationals of the metropolitan capitalist nations competing, exploit the resources of Venezuela, just like Africa. Colonialism is a system that has different facets. First, military subjugation. Anywhere the capitalist nation will want to colonize, there will be military subjugation to subjugate that area, to subdue them for exploitation. Then they will establish their domination. This is the colonial government, political domination, and of colonial rule is to plunder the economic exploitation of the colonies. And to achieve that, to make the colonial subjects accept their fate, there will be cultural alienation. So American culture spreads in Venezuela to accept the civilizing role of these leading capitalist nations that where they are there to civilize and things like that. So you see, I think 1835 between Venezuela and primarily because so the music Venezuela government was able to make progress in terms of infrastructure, building of roads, industries, paying debt, foreign debt, and part of their domestic debt and housing. So unfortunately, Venezuela experienced different internal crises in terms of despotic wars and things like that. And the ruling class lived in luxury while the masses lived in abject poverty. You can see the scenario of Venezuela. Think of Nigeria, you see the similarities. The masses, millions, lived in abject poverty. So there was this internal crisis that's going to be important to note when you are going to determine what made it easy for America to just run without the president and his wife, without anything. And corruption, widespread corruption among the ruling class. You know, there's a link between poverty, corruption, and insecurity. So went into Trump accusing Venezuela of narcotic terrorism. Narcotic terrorism is in terms of drug peddling, spreading drug trafficking, and appealing humanitarians where people are on severe poverty. So this is a salary problem they have there. And because of that, it became, despite the oil rich and having other resources, Venezuela became very weak in terms of foreign relations and other things like that, in terms of the army and things due to corruption. But then, despite that, after the balkanization of USSR, Soviet Republic in 1992, communism closely damaged. So we used to have the two world powers, superpowers, the socialist bloc the USSR and the capitalist world led by the United States of America during the Cold War, where the two superpowers had conflicts across the globe, proxy wars were fought on their behalf and things like that. But after the collapse of communism, America started to have the agenda of having a unipolar world, the new world order, to have a unipolar world. You used to have bipolar, headed by the communist country, USSR, and United States. When USSR went to the moon in 1956, America within some years went to the moon. So there was this competition and rivalry for domination of the world. Afghanistan was colonized somehow by USSR. They were controlling it. The Americans created Al-Qaeda, led by Osama bin Laden, to fight the Americans for 10 years in Afghanistan, and they defeated a superpower there. Al-Qaeda defeated USSR, a superpower created and backed by the Americans. I think Hillary Clinton said that. So America had this agenda of creating a unipolar world, championed by America. The American plans to control the entire world through military occupation, weakening of other countries that tries to develop, and through their multinational companies to exploit the source of. And this is one major feature of the capitalist system. Capitalism cannot survive without economy of less powerful countries. And that will be associated with military subjugation, to military fight a force of some theories, some narratives to prevail because of the resources. Right from the first stage of the capitalist system, mercantilist slave trade, other things, and up till now, under neocolonialism. Neocolonialism is colonialism in new ways, whereby the advanced capitalist countries will not come directly to establish government, but through their stooges, they try to control puppet regimes, bring in their multinationals, and through loans, like the Agric loan with their conditionalists that enslave such countries. Nigeria, Africa, Venezuela, Asian countries, through the IMF loan, World Trade Organization, things like that, they make sure that they enslave the peripheral capitalist countries through such things, so that they will become the dominant world power. And that was how America, after the collapse of communism, went about the world, attacking different countries. Libya, Yemen, setting up a Saudi-Yemen proxy war, in southern Sudan, or everywhere. And within that context that you can now understand, because under the Chavez, the preceding president of Venezuela, the national oil was nationalized, the iron industry was nationalized, other industries were nationalized, and that affected the American economy seriously. The nationalization of their oil company, the iron, electricity, other companies that were major countries that made Venezuela really a huge country, all rich country, were nationalized. And that means that American companies, British companies, others would be affected economically. When Chavez died of illness, cancer, real cancer, Maduro stepped in, he actually signaled that he wanted it to succeed in, and he continued the same policy of nationalizing their economy. And you can understand why America is saying that for narcotics, terrorism, America is now coming in to run that government of a sovereign nation for some time, and bringing American oil companies to manage their oil resources. What is the connection between narcotic terrorism and bringing in American oil companies to manage their oil resources? So you can now understand the picture, you can see the picture right from that within that context of the global capitalist system and the inherent contradictions in capitalism, the inherent nature of capitalist system to literally nations so as to plunder their economy, to control their government. For those reasons are the reasons historians will give you that behind this kidnap of the president of a sovereign nation and his wife. Thank you.